Let's get started today. Sorry, Stephen. I think we're about to start. So let's get going, and let me know otherwise in the chat if you have any questions along the way. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us today on this special event together with DataChecker, ICS, and Mitek. Very much welcome to this afternoon session. We'll be diving into how to prove identity for credit card acceptance while everything is going digital. Of course, it's a really challenging time while everyone's working remotely. So we've really seen a very strong wave into digitization over the past year, in fact, affecting the whole financial industry. And I'm really curious to dive in a little bit more into this case where we can see actually how card acceptance plays an important role, especially now in the times also where money laundering and KYC become much more important, stronger regulated and heavily in focus with all policymakers. So it's quite a cool topic, I think, which is usually quite well behind the scenes, but it's enabling actually the way we do payments in general today. So I'm really curious to explore, and we've got some great people here to tell you all about it. We're going to kick off in a moment with Leonie van Heusden from ICS. She's going to tell us a little bit about the KYC challenges that ICS has, and we're going to explore then also how she went into the journey to solve that. And also Walter Codee from DataChecker can actually help us explore how they played a role in solving that KYC challenge. And we've got Stephen Ritter here, CTO of Mitek, who's basically powering much of the technology behind all this, which is of course really cool to understand a little bit more about as well. And hopefully we'll be able to paint a picture well about how you could come from this challenging time from credit card acceptance and knowing your customers well enough to technical solutions that can really power the way we do that online these days. My name is Ginsel, for some of you that might not have seen me before. I'm founder of Holland Fintech, and really happy to take you through this conversation here today. Really looking forward to it. Should you have any questions along the way, please type them in the chat function in Hopin, so we can really get a sense of any topics that you might find interesting, and we'll try to see how we can weave them into the conversation. That said, let's kick off by painting the picture a little bit by Leonie. Yeah. Leonie,
thank you, Don. I'm responsible since 2 years within ICS to identify and verify all our current customers to be able to perform like you said, the customer due diligence on those customers. And that's of course necessary from our gatekeeper role in the financial institution world to investigate that we don't have any customers in our books who are busy with the money laundering and terrorism financing. But well, then we had a problem because we don't have the offices around the Netherlands to have the people coming around to have showing their ID. So therefore, we contacted DataChecker and Mitek to help to find us a solution to provide for our customers a safe and easy digital customer journey for their identification and verification process. And of course, as we want to be the safest and most reliable payment provider in the Netherlands, I think we created together with DataChecker and Mitek a very safe and reliable process.
Okay. I will take it from here, Leonie, if you're okay with that.
Yes, I want to like to know the story further from your point of view.
Yeah, we as DataChecker are working closely together with Mitek in different cases, and for example, the ICS remediation project. First of all, I would like to explain a little of what we do as DataChecker. We position ourselves in different markets as a end-to-end process solution provider. And we use in those solutions, we use always the Mitek technology to create a safe and secure onboarding solution. In this case, in the ICS remediation case, we work close together, the three of us, ICS, Mitek, and DataChecker, to create the end-to-end solution for the ICS customers. We started at server level, so we needed to create a picture of the process we wanted to create to remediate, to re-verify the ICS customers. And it was, of course, based on a high-level volume of verifications. But also, of course, to create a secure process. So we needed to go to the drawing table and create a picture in which we all understand how we could create the one-time solution with the three of us. So it's based, I would say, in three levels. First of all, server level. The second of all, ICS, the customer acceptance level. And the third part is the ICS monitoring level. So ICS can process or monitor the process from A to Z. And we're using, of course, the Mitek technology to create the safe onboarding by using auto capture, using liveness detection in the process.
Yep, clear. Yeah, I think that's really useful. And so maybe then immediately go to Stephen as well, as you mentioned the Mitek solution quite a bit. Stephen, how does that work on your end? How do you look at these kind of challenges?
Sure, I think this is a great order to talk about it in. First talking about what the ICS need is and why they're looking to verify these identities in a very large number of them in a small amount of time. That's extremely important to understand why we're doing things. And then, as Walter mentioned, regardless of the technology being used, I'll talk about Mitek in a second. The actual design of the user experience in these identity proofing, which look a lot like a user onboarding kind of use case, the experience, user experience is extremely important, right? So having a partner like DataChecker that's able to really design that experience and ensure that the maximum number of people successfully make it through, because we're asking them to do things for the very first time, right? Things they've never done before, take a picture of their identity document, take a picture of their face, and making sure that design is smooth and frictionless is really high priority, right? You want as many people making it through successfully, while of course at the same time, catching as much of the fraud as you can, right? And the fraud in these use cases can be significant. It really depends on the particular situation, but that's why those that DataChecker piece is so important. And then the Mitek technology, what we focus on, as I mentioned, is really combining that that proof that we have a living human person presenting a government issued identity document, and that the person is real, right? So we have liveness detection during the selfie capture, and that the document itself is real, right? So the document, we want to make sure it's a physical document and not a digital copy or a screen capture or something like that. And then, of course, we check the document for signs of tampering to ensure that it's the authentic document as issued. But if we can tie that person to that document at a point in time, with high confidence, then that helps our customers, such as ICS, get the confidence they need to say that this is a known, trusted identity.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you said, to really start with the why, right? So what's the problem actually that ICS is trying to solve, and maybe to go back to you, Leonie. So can you paint a picture a little bit on did you have a lot of discussions, for example, internally on how do you get your customers to actually step into a new process like this, to actually think about, okay, right, if we actually can't get them to come into an office, which I think these days is, so let's say if a financial service provider asks me to come to their office, I'm going to look for someone else. So it's besides the fact that COVID may have hampered us from actually going to the office. I think in general, the tendency is that people don't like to come to offices anymore, or at least not to for financial services. How are you coping with that, and how is that shaping your problem from the start?
Well, I think we did a lot of research with panels to see if together also with DataChecker to see if the flow is easy for the people to understand to do, and we use that feedback to improve the flow with DataChecker and Mitek. And of course, we have to do it, and it's sometimes challenging to convince the people that they have to do it. A large part of our portfolio, they are used to taking selfies with cameras or with your phone. But the older population is challenging to convince them to have the right device. And next to that, to really understand the process. So we made movies of the process. We have frequent asked questions, and every day we learn and use feedback of the customers to improve that process.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's quite a challenge indeed to get that right. And that, for example, did you also have to still invest on a sort of a fallback scenario where you still had people, let's say, for example, for elderly people that you had, gave them an alternative?
And that's an offline process with that people are going through to your house. And of course, in COVID, that's difficult, but we really have to do it also for to give the people a chance to choose the digital and the non-digital flow, while the digital flow is for us a preferred solution because we are moving towards a new ICS with a complete digital process. So of course we want to take everyone with us to that new ICS.
And is there still also, so it sounds also that it's part of a bigger digital transformation within ICS, right? So that indeed everything needs to go digital. Just curious, how's that moving forward? Basically, do you see that? Is it easy to bring everyone along there also internally? Because I think within financial services, it's still a challenge that we're so much used to all the paperwork. That is sometimes hard to imagine the world without it.
Absolutely, it's a challenge, and that's really a big program to transfer everyone with us to our new platform and also the customers. Yeah.
Well, thanks. I think it's really interesting what you're sharing. And so, Walter, how did you approach this? Right. So I think Leonie said that you're a lot of help in these processes to also even up to the level to assess, what's the customer experience like, and do they really understand what's going on? Is that where you invest a lot of your time?
It's all about measurements, if you know what I mean. So if you look at the processes, we always try to measure all processes. So of all ICS customers. And we get numbers of those measurements, so we know how to improve. Basically, it's doing the math, if you know what I mean. And of course, we have years of experience, so we know what we basically more or less can expect of a re-verification or remediation process. We also look at ages. We look at, I'm looking for the English word, and it's opleiding. Sorry, education level. So there are all types of measurements you can adjust in the process. So you still can enhance the success factor. That's basically what we doing every day.
And so does it mean you actually customize the user flow to a certain extent based on the profile of the users?
It's always in the three-way. So it's always connected to first of all in communication with ICS, of course. and second of all, with Mitek. So we can better the process.
Yeah. And so does it help now that let's say, for example, most of the neobanks are, for example, really trying to set an example here about the digital onboarding and the client verification? Does that in the end help in general with the acceptance of these kind of solutions? Do you feel that it's becoming really the normal nowadays, or was it mostly perhaps COVID that actually enticed everyone to play along here?
I think that helped.
COVID helped us speeding up the process. Of course, but there's still a long way to go. That's what I think. But we are getting there, and again, COVID helped us speeding the process. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually think that maybe the COVID influence was a bit more pronounced in getting the larger banks to move faster with the digital technologies. The neobanks are highly fintech driven, but the larger banks are much more conservative because they need to be. So I think it was, in a certain sense, it was fortunate, but I understand that ICS, their objective with this project began before COVID hit, and I think it was really fortunate that they began as early as they did.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, of course, the reach, the number of customers that you have to deal with is, of course, huge. So I think also from that perspective, I can really imagine that in that sense, the digital transformation was already something that to reduce cost and reduce friction in the whole process for customers must have been one of your objectives all along. And indeed, once COVID hits, you actually find out that actually all the alternatives are being cut off. So it really pushes people into this channel.
No, absolutely.
And so were you already ready when that happened? So basically, were the digital channels open before March last year? Or was it something that actually happened during lockdown periods, for example?
It was during the lockdown period. I think we started in May last year. But at that time, we had the offline solution. And we noticed that the people didn't want to have the people at their houses during the lockdown. So it was very nice good that we had this solution with the digital flow. And then we saw it going, and it started slow, but after a couple of months, we saw it really growing and getting faster, the people through the system. Because also we try to optimize the whole flow every week, every month to get as much people easily through the process.
What do you think was most critical in convincing let's say the technology laggards that were not so tech savvy to accept this immediately? What do you think was most critical to convince everyone? Was that indeed, let's say, good explainers or tell your neighbor about this kind of setting?
Good communication.
How did you do it?
Really, really a lot of explanation why we have to do this. Because a lot of people didn't understand, and always it was a kind of related to GDPR questions. Why do I need to make a picture? Why do I need to send my ID? Because privacy says no, but well, the regulator say yes. So we really, during the start of the process, we were not good enough with explaining why we need to do this, and we were the first who started with the re-identification. But now a lot of banks are doing the same. So people are getting used to the question. We need to re-identify you as a customer. And we really are every time to make it more explaining. It's safe. It's encrypted. It's they cannot do anything with your data. That's the most important part.
And did you see also internal discussions about this? Because I see that there's quite some up to legalistic discussions within the financial industry, because there is a challenge between what GDPR says and what the regulators ask you to do. You know, there is indeed quite some friction at that level. I mean, did you also have some internal discussions about that before you could actually get this off the ground first?
No, that was, and we had to start because we need to do a lot of customers. And of course, during the whole process, the questions started with GDPR and also with our mother to how we can use certain elements to make it better for the customer, to show them that we are not storing the real ID, etc. But that we really need the original to verify you. And that were a lot of discussions with Mitek also, and with the ABN AMRO Bank, with DataChecker, how we can make sure that the customer understands it.
Yep. No, I think that's key, of course, indeed, that the customer understands and feels comfortable in the process. How do you see that, Walter? How much is, for example, things like privacy, is that actually driving you as well in the whole process? It must be, right? So you have quite sensitive data on your hands. But
well, first of
all,
you have to explain to the customer what we are going to do with their data. Where it is for, so understand why we are doing this, and again, then it's really important to let them know that if it's finished, then we are done. So we aren't going to keep their data, and it's for us. If you look at the ICS project, we are communicating through the ICS. Company. So we are not communicating to the ICS customers DataChecker. We are communicating as ICS to create more certainty, first of all, but second of all, it's one. So we don't have to explain ourselves who we are, and it's based on the cooperation again with Mitek and ICS, and that creates expertise, but if you look at the customer journey, customers need to know what happens with their data, of course, but they also need to know why we are asking their data, and we have to explain it in real simple language. So every education level here in Holland, for instance, understands what we're asking. So we need it, and you don't write a book to ask a person something. Just use one sentence. It's more than enough.
That's, by the way, one of the bigger challenges also within the financial industry in general, because we tend to overcomplicate communication, right? Especially when we talk about contracts, it becomes really hard to read in most cases. But indeed, I think it can really solve a lot. I see you.
I absolutely do, and I think I actually empathize with some of that, because sometimes my answers are really long and wordy. So I know that trying to keep things brief and to the point. And I actually think there's a lot of value in what GDPR has laid out as a framework for us to ensure that we're providing the right notification and getting the right consent at the right time, instead of the big, large 10-page long end user license agreement that would get presented before. But I want to add on to what Walter said before about so notification and consent and informing the consumer is priority number one. But the other bit of that, and the three of us spoke about this before, so I know it's similar at ICS and DataChecker, but it's the culture of the company that's providing the solution that's important as well. So the culture that we foster at Mitek to ensure that everybody in our company respects the data and understands that we are here to process the data for a certain purpose and not hold on to it and not use it for other things. That's a really, really important part, I think, of at least being a technology provider in this space. And then our role of providing our partners, such as DataChecker and ICS, with all of the information they need about our service, so they can then decide what is appropriate to give to their end users. and also what's appropriate to share internally with their own security and compliance organizations as well. So I think if you bring those two things together, and you really care about the data, and you communicate it well to the end customer, then things work out well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one, and I fully agree there. I think that the explanation is all done. We actually got a question in that might actually be interesting to explore. There is indeed how much customers are actually able to go through such a process by themselves, or how much assistance is still required for it. Do you have any insights on that, Leonie?
I think Walter should have the numbers, because they are seeing the first problems arise in the process, because they can chat directly with the customers during the flow to ask, okay, what's the problem, and what is the difficulties with the process. So Walter, do you have the exact numbers who are going directly through the flow with no help?
I'm sorry, I don't know the numbers. I have to get into that, but I can arrange then some numbers. I've Tom next to me. He'll find out the numbers. So just give me a minute. But nevertheless, to go into that question, there's always you have to see that we can provide a online solution and using technology, of course, and that helps a piece of the pie to onboard flawlessly. But there's also a big piece of the pie who needs help, because we're still people, and not all people know how to work those things, and some people don't even have those. So you always have to look at a way to support and create support in those type of solutions. And we created the support level in the ICS re-verification solution based upon basically three things. It's by phone, by mail, and by chat. And where chat is the most used communication piece. So
okay, so but if I understand that correctly, that means that they don't go through the process completely independently, but there is some interaction with someone else. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are used to.
You have to understand one thing, and I'm always repeating myself, but it's in the online world, we are as physical beings. We can't digitize ourselves. We can digitize the process, which helps us, of course, but there's still some issues we need to support to help the person at the other side.
Yeah, and metrics are really important here, right? And one of the benefits of a partner like Mitek is, we're able to look across many different customers and many different use cases, and we can provide guidance on setting expectations for DataChecker and ICS on, hey, when you're using the Mitek solution, here are the approval rates that you can expect, right? So you can understand. And on one hand, just to give the question some concrete answers, we generally think about acceptance rates, which means image acceptance, because the data that we're processing, the selfie, the image of the identity document, those need to be of sufficient quality for us to give a high quality result. So image acceptance is a really important metric, and that's followed very closely by approval rate. So if we get a good image that we can process, and then we determine that's a living phase, it's matched to the document, and the document is not tampered with, then we call that an approval, right? So in best in class, following all the guidance on how to design a good UI, user experience, all of that, we see customers generally coming in around 90 to 95% approval rate. But the key thing here, but going all the way back to what we talked about before, correctly what Leonie and Walter talked about before, is that the user experience is so important, because when we look at the customers that have lower approval rates and the ones that have higher approval rates, it's not because one's finding more fraud and one's finding less fraud. It's because one has a better user experience and is getting better images in and is helping all of those different types of users through the process successfully. In reality, your fraud rates are going to be probably somewhere between 0.5 percentage point and 2%. So that accounts for the 95 to 100%, that 5% gap. There's going to be a significant amount of that was detected fraud. That user experience is just so important. But as Walter said, measuring and keeping track of those metrics along the way and continuously is also very important.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive in a little bit more into the fraud perspective later. Leonie, you wanted to say something just now, I thought.
I think it's quite an easy process, but because of the quality of the picture, that's the most important part, to have explanation for the customer, because you really need to have not too much light like I have now to take the picture, etc. Because we really want to have the good check of Mitek to have the fraud cases out. And that's why you need the most help to really explain dark background, light background, no light, less light, to make it successful.
Do you also see the criteria change over the let's say, probably not over the past couple of months, but maybe do you see that that's changing over time, what the requirements are for the re-verification, so that indeed you need additional information, or you need to work with your error margins, that they need to be reduced, for example? Is that something that you talk about with supervisors, or is there some internal discussion perhaps on how you should adjust that?
Well, I think we have a continuous discussion on all the elements. Also, how we can, because how we can improve, like we are developing the app now, because not only the web version, but also an app version, and that's make it even more easier for the customer to go through the process. So that kind of internal discussions we have regularly.
Exactly.
Word for Dutch people. Sorry, Stephen.
It's okay. Well, I appreciate that this is in English. I would not be able to participate if it was in Dutch. So.
So thanks. So maybe Stephen, to go back on the fraud cases that you were mentioning, right? So I think, how do you see? I mean, especially one of the last year was not just successful for legit digital solutions, but actually also fraudulent digital arrived over the past year. I think I'm getting in, let's say, between 2 and 5 phishing messages a day these days. And I think they're actually becoming much better, right? So I think compared to a couple of years back, you only had sort of the Nigerians that sent really poor written emails to try and convey people to wire money. But nowadays, I think they're beginning to look much more like the genuine service providers. But also, I can imagine that let's say, at least that's really traceable fraud, at least from a layman perspective. But how do you see that evolving from the perspective of people trying to fraud identity verification, for example? What's happening?
The unfortunate thing is that the fraudsters, many of them are very smart and they're very well funded, and they understand what macro trends are going on in the world, and they will follow those trends, right? So if it's a COVID-19 pandemic and touchless experiences are required, therefore digital experiences are required, then we're going to start attacking those services much more, right? And we do see across our customer base a rise not only in the number of attacks, but it's actually, the percentages stay somewhat similar, but because the number of people that are using digital services and the number of transactions overall is rising, and those percentages stay the same, but the overall, the net number of attacks is increasing. We're also seeing an increase in sophistication. And so one of the things we do at Mitek is working with our customers. We're continually studying, what's happening within these transactions. And then we adjust our development cycles at Mitek to focus on building new technology to detect, these new techniques that we're seeing. A good example is deep fakes, right? At least in the US, there was this deep tongue cruise. I think that was I think that went global, right? And that technology is just, as a CTO, I'm fascinated by it, right? We actually use the underlying bits of the deep fake technology for internally testing our solution, but we actively build protections against deep fakes, right? In this use case, the primary detection is liveness, but that's what you have to do. It's just like it is a cybersecurity problem where the fraudster is continually modifying their techniques. So you have to continually be learning from them and then putting up new defenses.
Quite a challenge, I think, but it's indeed a sort of armed battle to figure out, who's moving fastest. And you'll know that you don't know exactly which techniques will be used for the next strike, but you have to be on top of it to discover where it's happening and how to defend yourself for the next one, basically. Do you also take it into account, Walter? So it's part of your process design as well. Do you also continuously have to
always
take fraud into account?
And it's again, it's all about the measurements. So we are measuring from which corner the fraud is coming, or it's not as good as Mitek does, because Mitek is basically our partner in the IDV process, not only on technology but also on the authenticity of the ID documents. But the thing we measure is where does this image is coming from? What kind of image is it? So that's what we measure, so we can see if it's okay to send it over to Mitek or keep it here and just give it back to the person in question.
Yeah.
But that's just one of the measurements we use. There are a lot of typical messages or measurements. It's all on AI based. Deep fake, of course, you just mentioned it. We are also working with a startup, students from the University of Delft, working on deep fake technology. And we are going to work with them together to create in the front of the process the first, let's say, measurement to see if that's a deep fake, and so we can stop the process right in front of that. So and that's just one of the measurements again we use. But they try to fool you in all ways. You can't imagine. It's and there are a lot of let's say fraud stories, like people buying IDs at embassies for not a lot of money, but they're still real authentic IDs. So it's a pretty big discussion, if I can say it like that.
Yeah, no, for sure, and of course you can have all kinds of frauds, it surely impacts the whole process, because indeed one of the reasons that we're actually doing all of this is because there are fraudsters around, right? So that's actually the whole the fact that we actually need to do an additional administrative process has something to do with that as well.
I have the answer to the question of Robin. It's 97.3% which don't need help in the process. So and that's based on the user experience, of course, but also on the technology of Mitek. The auto capturing technology makes it really easy to create the right picture we need or Mitek needs to verify the document. So that's good.
well, quite a decent number, I would say. So sounds pretty good. Yeah. And so what I'm curious about is also that what we talked about at some point somewhat earlier is like, okay, currently now also the identity verification takes place partly in the offline world. Of course, when we talk about validating a live person, that's of course clear because we can't bring that one online. But if you talk about document verification, that's still something that's, well, I would say pretty old-fashioned because that's something that actually doesn't need to be offline. Where do you see things heading from there? Do you think, I mean, there are of course some initiatives where, government, but also banks are stepping up with digital identity solutions. Do you feel that those things are going to play an important role in also customer due diligence and identity verification in the long run? Because of course, let's say everywhere where I have to wave my physical passport, I always feel a bit like Fred Flintstone.
I can jump in there. I'll talk about it maybe from the technology perspective and what we're seeing globally, right? The answer is yes, and this is also a personal opinion, is I would love, myself and Mitek are trying to encourage businesses to get to adopt more digital forms of identity verification. I think there's a lot of interesting conversation around who should be owning and driving that. Is that a government driven and owned thing, or is it just a government supported concept? But I think decentralized identity, there are specific types of decentralized identity like self-sovereign identity that I think are really interesting. But I think there are things that the technology's there, right? I mean, we have all the bits we need to put these systems together. I think at this point, it's more of a business and social problem. And I'm really interested what Leonie might see at the ICS level about, is ICS ready for a decentralized identity solution? Are they tracking it? But the technology is there and ready to go.
Yeah, I think it's a hot topic in ICS because we are moving towards a new platform. That the innovation department is really monitoring all the new solutions in the market on those elements. And of course, we are also discussing with our mother, ABN AMRO, and I know they are also discussing a lot of new things in this area, how we can make use of those elements. And because we have to move forward and make it better, and also still it's not only ID fraud in ICS, but also the ID of the account takeovers. So you have also the authentication part of the process. That is really important, that there's no possibility to get into between the ID and the authentication process for frauds. And therefore it's really important that those both elements are proper secured. And that's technology like liveness together with NFC readings to move further in the line during the coming years. That's really important. And I think, we are looking into that at ICS.
Do you think then also that perhaps identification and authentication might actually get closer together, like in a similar kind of process?
I think it should, because the further apart, the more steps in between, the more chance that a fraud can step in.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, that's for sure. And that's at the same time also, I'm also curious how you see that. Let's say one of the things I'm seeing as well is that traditionally financial institutions would basically impose all the risk parameters of the process, right? So they would determine, this is now when I need an additional verification. But actually what I see these days as well, that you actually get also much more customer-driven risk acceptance, yes or no, to say like, when something happens, I would want the user of the app or of my card to be revalidated to make sure that actually my account doesn't get taken over. So how do you see that evolving? Is it also something you would value from ICS, that to give a bit more control to the customer from that perspective, to also manage that risk?
I think I will pass this question to maybe Walter or Stefan. I don't know. That's because that's something really for the departments who are really into this topic in innovation to have the.
Yeah, I think
and I'm really.
It's a great question because, I'll come back again to what we've all been talking about on the side of user experience, right? When you think about identity verification, right, that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is identity protection, and I think the better job that we can do as technology providers, all the way to the end consumer, of helping them understand that the reason why we're asking for this information is to help protect your identity, right? That's not exactly what you were asking about, Don, but it's a good example of getting the consumer involved. And once you get them involved, then you can start providing the consumer value of these solutions directly to them and start getting them more involved in decision making. I've been in cybersecurity for over 25 years. And one of the challenges with consumer cybersecurity is actually finding the right value to the end user to get them involved, right? To get them to really put the time in. Well, maybe it shouldn't be time. It should be easy. It should be frictionless, but they need to understand the value of what they're getting to go do these things. So I think that's why, the work that DataChecker does is so important, because it creates that experience and that flow that helps the end user understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly also what I mean there as well, is that indeed, let's say if it's all just being pushed forward as a regulatory burden, it's hard to get everyone on board. While there is a certain amount of self-interest for consumers as well to actually want to play along here. And just like that, for example, if I go to my bank app, I could actually say, I think this is what my daily limit should be, because that's sort of what I believe that fits my program. And if not, I would like to give an additional approval before actually that amount can be higher to be spent, right? And that's also one of the ways to actually introduce a risk parameter that's partly controlled by a consumer, and it creates a lot of awareness, I think, of what kind of risks are actually being taken. But Walter, I'd love to hear your take on this as well.
I can imagine, but I think we are a little bit spoiling the customers, that we have a fraud team who is spending a lot of time with fraud rules to proactively contact the customer. I think you have to look to your account, because there's fraud on your account. So I think, yes, it's good if the customer is also being responsible for that, but I think we as ICS we have a really big team who are really proactively monitoring the customers to help them to prevent fraud.
Yeah, okay. I can imagine that, of course, that still gets a lot of attention in. But for example, one of the things that I see, that in some accounts, let's say some accounts, they actually send you a push notification for any transaction that you do. So basically, if there would actually be fraud, it's right in the face of the customer, instead of that at the end of the month, he has to figure out whether these 50 transactions were actually theirs, right? Because then it's actually not, they can't be involved. So I think that the customer interaction might play an interesting role there as well, to perhaps.
But I think with the strong customer authentication rules now, there is already that every transaction they do, they get a notification to have a second opinion. So they see more clearly all their transactions coming up. And so you see that fraud reduces, but of course that's European area, but outside the world, they don't have it all yet. And there you see still the frauds are happening there with the web shops, etc.
No, for sure. Do you also see that different, by the way, Stephen, between sort of what's happening in Europe and, for example, how it's going in the US with regard to indeed fraud levels? Do you see a big difference there?
Not at the broad scale, right? I think that what we see is industry by industry, whether it's financial services or marketplace or sharing. We do see different trends there. One example that might be kind of obvious, and this is kind of a pandemic topic, is we have a customer that rents out homes online, right? Essentially, right? Or rooms in homes. That business really wasn't doing too well during the early parts of the pandemic, and is just starting to come back. But we also have customers that, for example, get involved in delivering groceries. And as you would imagine, digital delivery services have really been expanding during the pandemic. And what we see is that, as I said before, the bad guys spend their time where they're going to get the most benefit, right? So they're going to stop focusing so much on the home rental space and maybe start focusing more on the delivery space. And unfortunately for the financial services, Leonie, financial services are always a target. It's that's the dynamic that we see across our customer base.
Yeah. But have you got something like strong customer authentication
yes,
for
absolutely.
credit cards in the US, for
the
example?
same use case. But to your point, maybe this is what you were asking about, Don, is that I think the drivers are different, and typically what we see is Europe leads on more of the regulatory side of things, and the US follows. It generally follows with California first, and then the rest of the US. And then the US generally leads when it's just more of a business or commercial driven initiative where the businesses are just losing money. So fraud's important to them because they're losing money, not so much because of the regulatory reasons. But KYC AML is something that's driving the financial services regardless of where you are in the world.
Yeah, no, increasingly indeed. So what do you think about this from where do you see the customer journey basically heading from here? If we look a bit more further into the future, what can we expect on the whole identity verification level? You think
it's all based on security verification, authentication, and trust levels, basically, and that's. And that depends, of course, on the transaction, the moment you're in online. Where are you? What are you going to purchase? Or are you going to open a new bank account? Or is it a bank account for your spouse? Or it's. I think there's different levels of authentication and verification. And of course, how high is the amount you are going to need for a purchase or let's say a mortgage? How can we create those security and authenticity and verification levels to digitize the process, and not only in the physical world, of course, where we have a lot of ways to measure the moment we're in. So if I'm physical and I'm sitting next to you or against you, Don, I can see who you are. I can see you're moving, your body language. It says a lot. That's what we are as a human have in us. We can measure that. That's real physical, of course. And in the digital world, we need it to be. We need more technology. We need more security and verification levels to create that trust, so we know that it's okay.
But also here, if I listen to you well, you see also new use cases in other financial products. If I read between the lines, do you also think that because I think indeed mortgages is still also quite a cumbersome process that could also use some help, so to say. But also, if you talk about, do you also think that outside financial services there's much to do with identity verification?
Yeah, we see the identity verification. Questions coming from let's say from Corona, from COVID. There's a lot of ways. A lot of companies are working to new products to make COVID easier for all of us. And I can't say a lot about it, but it's a new economy that's created through COVID. So that's where we're in right now, and it's basically we need to do something, and it's online, but we also need to know that that I am the person who is there. So that's one. The other thing is we see in the sharing economy, we see a lot of movement right at this point. It's weird, but the sharing economy is really going up. So there's a lot of movement. Yeah, and
so that's all indeed about actually building trust relationships online, right? So indeed that you actually can validate who am I doing business with, and is that someone I would want to do business with?
But you see it in all markets. We're all evolved pretty quick in starting COVID. It's a year ago, of course. We all know that, and but we see how fast we adapted basically. And it's online, of course, what I'm talking about, not the other businesses and markets who are really struggling right now. But if you look at our business, we're doing it's all online. So if you look at the online market, the online economy, it's growing, and it's growing fast.
Yeah, I think something that Walter said there is super important, and it kind of relates down to your question about other markets and other verticals for identity verification, and that's that there are different identity assurance levels that are required for different use cases, right? Within financial services, if you're opening up a deposit account versus if you're applying for a large loan, that's a very different kind of risk profile, right? And you need you could go for very different identity assurance levels for each one. And the other thing is just the underlying technology. And, to a large extent, what we're providing is a way to automate a lot of the steps that used to be done solely by humans. One of the things that differentiates Mitek, and I think makes us quite a good solution, or I would say the best solution in the market, is that we've combined the best of machine learning and AI to automate steps with a team of human document experts that can review transactions as well, right? And best practice is to mix both of those use cases. So, when you want the vast majority of your users are good users, right? They're not committing fraud, right? Fraud's gonna be 1% to 2%. So that means that 98% of your users are good users. Right, you want to let them through as quickly as possible with as little friction as possible. And the trick is, how do you know which ones to apply more friction to, right? And that's exactly what Mitek helps out with, is we can say, hey, we're very confident that this selfie and this document is good. We recommend letting them go straight through. But this one, and maybe this one we know it's bad, so just say no to it quickly. But then there's these ones in the middle that we're concerned. There's some issues with it, so let's give it some extra review. And that's really the magic, right? Being able to bring those two things together. I would love to see a future where the machine learning can do everything 100%. But even in that case, Mitek will continue to be what I refer to, or what many refer to as human in the loop machine learning, where we continually have humans involved in the process, because you just can't let the black box algorithms do what they want to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's really interesting to see where from that perspective, where these things heading in the future, and definitely AI, machine learning, will play an important role, I think, in tackling it, because it's actually also increasingly part of frauds and attacks that we have to fence off, of course. So, Leonie, just curious, what is your next challenge going from here, right? So. What are you up to from here on, looking into the future for ICS?
Well, for me, it's to have all the customers ready and done. So we are still working with Walter and Mitek to have to make the program a success. So that's my challenge for the future. And for ICS is just to move on and continue innovating the new processes we are going to build.
I think it's because I think you play such an important role, I think, in, let's say, the distribution of cards in the Dutch market to such a large extent. I think it will definitely have an impact. So I think it's really nice for sharing already all your insights.
Okay.
How about you, Walter? What's what are you up to? What are the next steps for DataChecker?
Closer together with Mitek, of course. That's what we are planning to do, or already agreed on. But and not only in Holland, in the Netherlands, also in the UK, where we're already working together closely in different cases. So, but nevertheless, we want to create again an end-to-end solution for all markets. We're in the finance market, also the healthcare market is really growing fast again through COVID, and we are aiming for those markets together with Mitek again, and of course helping and supporting ICS wherever we can to make again as Leonie already said, to make this project to a full success. I think it's already a success if we look at the numbers, and that's basically what we agreed upon. What is it? 1.5 years ago. So and we worked great together with the three companies. I think that was really good. And from DataChecker perspective, I would say we have to grow, we have to digitize more, automate more, create more online end-to-end solutions for all markets.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great mission to be on, because I think this is you still see that basically the interaction between the physical and the digital world still knows some friction, and I think in any way that we could actually reduce that friction and make our experience in the digital world as smooth as can be, I think plays an important role in indeed in acceptance and also basically success rates of things that you want to do online. Yeah. So cool. And how about you, Stephen? What are on a tech level? What's coming up? You think
you kind of hinted at my answer just earlier, Don, about the mission of identity. Right, identity is incredibly important to everything we're doing. As the world becomes more digital, it's not going to become less digital. It's going to become more digital. So ensuring that as many people can get access to these critical services as possible and do it in a safe way. That's Mitek's mission. And as we look at what that's going to mean in the future, that's going to mean, of course, better and more machine learning, doing what we're doing now, supporting more documents. But that's also going to be saying, hey, how can Mitek help chart a path towards a truly decentralized digital identity future? Which is why we focus so heavily on these bridge technologies, such as NFC, as we talked about before. It's still a Flintstones physical document, yep. Right? As you said before, Don. But now it has a chip on it, right? And we can, and within Mitek, we can read the information on that chip, and we can verify even to a greater degree that the document hasn't been tampered with, and we can create even more security in that digital experience. And then the next step is to go to a full digital identifier, right? So that's what keeps Mitek going, and I think what's great about it is the mission. You know, we're helping the world and we're fighting crime, right? What better mission could you be on?
That's of course that's a great one indeed, right? So I think that's there is a lot of technology help there needed. So it's great that you've picked this up and are working on this. Yeah, I think it's great. I think we're having a great discussion, but I think it would be good to also not extend it too long into people's afternoon. So it might be good to wrap it up. Any last words from you, Leonie, perhaps? Anything you would want to share?
I relate with Stefan that, of course, we do it. My job is to do it because of a regulatory thing, but it is also for the customer, to help the customer that they know that we are a safe and reliable company, that we are not working together with people who are busy with money laundering, and so that we are really helping the world to make it a little bit safer.
Yeah, indeed. Stephen, from your end, any last things you want to share?
I think we covered it really well here. I just want to say thanks for having me. This has been a fantastic conversation, and as always, it's a pleasure working with DataChecker and ICS.
Well, great. It's a pleasure to have you as well, Stephen. Great to get your perspective on from the other side of the ocean. So I hope your coffee suits you well and you have a good day ahead.
There's a lot of work to be done,
your end?
Don. So we have to do a lot of good work, I think, in the combination of different companies. But I think we're getting there. But there's a lot of opportunities we have to create ourselves based on legislation and all kinds of different opportunities, of course. But no, we're getting there. But there's a lot of work to be done, Don. So, but thanks for having me. And yeah, well, I hope to see you next time.
No, indeed. Well, I think it was really great to get you all together here to have this discussion to explore this case on how ICS was dealing with identity verification together with Mitek and DataChecker. So I think thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you everyone for joining and listening in. Looking forward to talk to you more about this and more topics, of course, at our future events. Please check out hollandfintech.com/events to see everything that's coming up. For now, there is a networking option in the Hopin platform. If you go on the left side of your screen, you see a networking button there. After we close off, if you would go there, you could actually have a short speed date kind of meeting with other attendees or perhaps with the speakers if they're able to cling along. So for now, I'd like to thank you very much. Please send us your feedback. You'll be getting an email to ask for that. We're looking forward to hear about that and looking forward to talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Don.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.